We are on 23a, 10 lines down, discussing the idea that when you say you're not going to eat, so not drinking is included. What we call in Hebrew, shtia bichlal achila. Shtia is drinking. That's included in the prohibition of eating. Drinking is included in eating. So Amar Rava says, our Mishnah is also a support for this idea that drinking is included in eating. And we have two cases in the Mishnah that's going to be either a proof or a difficulty. So let's see. So Amar Rava says, Rava of Ananami Tanina. Look at our Mishnah. The guy says, Shavua Shelo Ochel. I make an oath not to eat anything. I'm not eating. Now, what did he do? The achal vishasa. He ate and he drank. So, what are you liable for? One or two? Says the Mishnah, Eno chai v'la'achas. I'm only liable one. So he said, I'm not eating, and then he ended up eating and drinking. And yet the Mishnah says you're only liable one. So now, if you understand that drinking is subsumed under eating, so then the Mishnah is teaching me a novelty. If drinking is subsumed under eating, so then the Mishnah is teaching me a novelty that when I say I don't eat, I'm not eating, the guy makes a swear, I'm not eating. Included in that is eating and drinking. Then he goes and he eats and he drinks, yet he's only liable one, not two. Okay, that I understand. But if drinking is not subsumed under eating, so then what is the Mishnah teaching me? The Mishnah says a guy makes an oath, I will not eat. And if he ate and he drank, you're only liable one. If drinking is not subsumed under eating, so obviously you're only liable one, what would you have thought? Why would you be liable more than that? So if it's not included in eating, a guy makes an oath, I'm not eating anything. And then he eats and he also plows or he does some kind of work. So what's he liable for? Of course, only one. He only said eating. Working wasn't included in his oath. So if drinking is not included in eating, so then there's no novelty of the Mishnah to teach me that that you're only liable one. Because why would you have thought you're liable for drinking if drinking is not included in eating? But if drinking is included in eating, then there would be a novelty that you're only liable one and not two. Okay. So that's Rava. Rava says our Mishnah is a support for this idea that you're only liable, that drinking is subsumed under eating, and our Mishnah, the beginning of our Mishnah, seems to be a support for that. So now, Amar le Abaye is going to have trouble with this, and then Rava's going to have to defend himself. Amar le Abaye. So what do you want to tell me? Elamai, shtia b'chlal achila. So you're telling me from our Mishnah in general that what drinking is included in eating. Okay, but look at the next line in the Mishnah. Ema Seifa, the very next line tells you, Shavua shelo ochel v'shelo eshte. A shavua that I will not eat, and a shavua that I will not drink. So you're making a shavua I will not eat and I will not drink. And what did you do? You ate and you drank. V'achal v'shasa. Chayiv shtayim. You're liable too. Now remember, if drinking is subsumed under eating, then when he said, I'm not going to eat, so that included eating and drinking. When you say a second oath just to uphold your first oath, that doesn't work. That's like making an oath on something which you're already obligated from Har Sinai. That doesn't work. So says Abaye, gave on the Amar once, since you said, Shelo Ochel, once you said, I'm not eating, you make an oath not to eat, it's Serle B'shtia. You're already prohibited in drinking, because according to you, Rava, according to our Mishnah, drinking is subsumed under eating. Once you said, I'm not going to eat, then included in that oath that I'm not going to drink. So then when you said, I'm not going to drink, ki amar shalai eshte, why are you liable? Ilu amar, if you would have said, shalo eshte trei zimni mi mechayev tarti, if the guy makes an oath, he swears I'm not drinking, and then he says, I swear again I'm not drinking. The second oath doesn't work because, like we keep mentioning, an oath needs somewhere to land, like a nether also. An oath, it has to obligate you. If you're already obligated, it can't obligate you again. It has nowhere to obligate you. So just like if you say I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to drink, you make back-to-back oaths. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink. The second oath does not work. So too, Abai is saying to Rava, if you say I'm not going to eat, included in eating is drinking. So it's another way of saying that you're not going to drink. And then you again made an oath, I'm not going to drink. It's the same thing. It should not obligate you. And therefore, if you violate it, you're only liable one. Yet our Mishnah says you're liable two. That's Abai's difficulty from bringing our Mishnah as a proof to the idea that shtiya is bichlal achila. So now Rava says, Amar le. So you have to say when the Mishnah told you he made a shvuah not to eat, not to drink, there's like a little bit more in general terminology. The specifics were Amar le hasam the Amar shalei eshta. Really, first he said he makes an oath, I'm not drinking. Now, included in drinking is only drinking. We never said that eating is included in drinking. We only said that drinking is included in eating. So the first thing he says is, I'm not drinking. Shaloi eshta. The hadar amar shelo ochel. Then he makes an oath, I'm not going to eat. So once he makes an oath, I'm not going to eat. So now, the shtiya b'chlal achila isa. Drinking is included in eating. Achila b'chlal shtiya lesa. But eating is not included in drinking. So according to Rava, that would be the case in the Mishnah. First, the guy says, I'm making an oath, I'm not going to drink. So that obligates him now that from drinking anything. He's not allowed to drink anything. Then he says, I'm not going to eat. Included in eating is drinking. It's also eating. So this is, we'll see much more about this in a few minutes. It's called an Isser Kollel. Once the Shavuot, the oath, has something to latch onto, it can even include things that are already prohibited. So in this case, he's prohibited from drinking anything. But the guy says, now he says, I'm making an oath, I'm not going to eat. So included in this oath is eating. So once the oath is obligating me to eat, to not eat anything, it can also obligate me to not drink anything. And therefore, if I violate it, I will be obligated to. So, aval amar shvuah shelo ochel v'shelo eshta. But if he would have said, like we thought originally our Mishnah was talking about, I'm not going to eat, and then he says I'm not going to drink, and then he ate, and then he drank, v'akal v'shasa, so my enochai v'la'achas, then you'll only be liable one and not two. So basically, Abaye asked from our Mishnah that it sounds like you can't bring a proof from our Mishnah that drinking is included in eating, because when the guy says, I will not eat, and then he says, I will not drink, so then you'll be liable too. But how could you be liable too? Drinking's already included in the first oath. The second oath couldn't get off the ground. So that Rava says you have to flip it. The Mishnah is really talking about a case of I'm not going to drink, and then he says I'm not going to eat. In that case, there are really two oaths obligating you. But if you would have said I'm not going to eat and then I'm not going to drink, you'll only be liable one. So Rava will uphold his statement that our Mishnah could still be a support for the idea that drinking is included in eating. Okay. Now, if this is true, we're going to have like a technical difficulty. If that's what our Mishnah is talking about, it's a case where the second line of the Mishnah is, I will not drink and I will not eat. And there the Mishnah is teaching me that I'm liable too. If that's true, so Aditani Resha, the first line of the Mishnah that just said Shavuot Shelo Ochel, I will not eat. And then he ate and drank, I'm only liable one. You should teach a bigger novelty. What would be the bigger novelty? Listening Shavuot Shelo Ochel Vishelo Eshta. It should have taught a case of I will not eat, I will not drink, and yet I'm only liable one. That would be a much bigger novelty. So once you changed the second case of the Mishnah and you flipped the order to the guy obligating himself and not drinking first and not eating second, you opened up another case now. So you open up a case of I will not eat and then I will not drink. And now if the first line of our Mishnah wants to teach us that you're only obligated one, so that would have been a much bigger novelty. So the kol shekain shlo ochel l'chudei. Not only when I say I will not eat and then I will not drink, and I ate and I drank, am I liable one? But for sure, if I just say I'm not going to eat, for sure I'm only liable one. So that's the problem, that the Mishnah should have taught a bigger novelty, and yet it didn't. Sounds like the second line of the Mishnah stays the same. The reason why the first line of the Mishnah didn't teach it like that, it's because really the second line of the Mishnah was the way we thought it was. First you said I will not eat, then you said I will not drink, and you went and you ate and you drank and you're liable too. Now, if that's true that you're liable too, so then a bias question still stands. When you obligated yourself not to eat anything, according to you, Rava, subsumed under eating is drinking. So you're already not allowed to eat or drink anything. When you utter the second Shavuot of I'm not going to drink, it should not get off the ground. It shouldn't obligate you in anything. So how is Rava going to respond? So Ela li olam kidekatani. Really go back to the way we originally understood the Mishnah. That really it's talking about I will not eat and then I will not drink. True. The shiny hacha kaven the amar shelo ochel. The hadar amar shelo eshte galia daite the hacha achila the amar achila greidasahi. So a novel approach that Rav is suggesting. Even though drinking is subsumed in eating, but when a guy says I will not eat, and then he says another oath, I will not drink, so what's he doing? He's revealing to us that he wants the first oath to only take place on foods and not drinks. How do I know? Because his second oath obligates him now in not drinking anything. So even though generally drinking is subsumed under eating, but when the guy makes two oaths, I will not eat and then I will not drink, what he's really showing us is that the first oath is only regarding foods. It would be the same as if the guy explicitly stated, I'm making an oath not to eat any foods and only foods, not drinks. So when he makes two back-to-back oaths, I will not eat and I will not drink, so that's in essence what he's doing. He's revealing to us that he wants the first oath to only obligate him on solids, not on liquids. And therefore, the second oath can get off the ground. That's how Rava would understand the Mishnah. Presumably, Abaye didn't like this because once you're saying that liquids are included in solids, so unless you explicitly state that you only want foods and not drinks mentioned, so then we should assume that it's always included. But Rava said no. Even such a back-to-back two oaths can reveal to us that the first one was only going to obligate you in solids. Okay, so all we did now was just Rava brought a support from our Mishnah that drinking is included in eating. Abaye had a problem with the second line of the Mishnah. I will not eat, I will not drink. You're obligated to, and that Rava was able to wiggle out of it, and that's that. Okay. Amar Rav Ashi says Rav Ashi, Masnisin Nami Deka. Our Mishnah could be a support. A different part of the Mishnah could be a support for this idea that drinking is included in eating. Masnisin Nami Deka. Look at the next part of a latter part of our Mishnah. Shvuah shelo ochel v'yachal ochlin she'en ru'in lachila v'shasa shel she'en ru'in l'shtia pater. A guy makes a shvuah. He makes an oath. I will not eat. Okay. And now the Mishnah teaches us if he eats things that are not edible or he drinks things that are not drinkable, he is not going to be liable. The very strong implication is ha'ru'uyin chayiv. If either food or drink were edible or drinkable, so then you would be liable. Now all he uttered was, I will not eat. He didn't say drinking at all. And the implication is, if he were to drink a drinkable drink, then he would be liable. So that would be a proof that drinking is included in eating. Why? He just said, I'm not going to eat. He never said, I'm not going to drink. So what do we see? drinking is included in eating. And when he said, I will not eat, it was a general way of saying, I'm not going to consume anything, whether it's food or whether it's liquids. Says the Gemara, that's not necessarily such an implication. Why? Because it could be Dilma de Amar Tarti, Shvuah Shelo Ochel, and Shvuah Shelo Eshte. Meaning the Mishnah is just bringing out a different point. The Mishnah is just showing to us that if you eat or drink things that are not edible, that you're not going to be liable. But his actual oath could have been an oath of I will not eat and I will not drink. The Mishnah is just not getting into the specifics of exactly what the beginning of the oath was. Its point just is that if it's not edible, that's not considered food. That was the main point of that line. So therefore, it's not an ironclad proof. So you can get out of that one also. Okay. The Mishnah told us that a guy makes an oath. He says, I will not eat pas chitin, pas so'irin, pas kusmin. I will not eat bread, wheat bread. I will not eat barley bread. And I will not eat spelt bread. And he ate it. The Mishnah says he's chayiv, he's liable for each and every one. So, the Gemara is not going to be bothered by when a guy utters, I will not eat these three breads. So, how do you know? So the Mishnah tells us it's like he made three oaths. I will not eat wheat bread. I will not eat barley bread. And I will not eat spelt bread. Says the Mishnah, maybe he was just saying the following. He just wanted to exempt himself from everything else. He's basically saying, I'm not eating bread. He wants to just exempt himself. He wants to just obligate himself to not eat bread as opposed to, I don't know, chocolate or steak or chicken or whatever, things like that. But it's not that he wanted to make three separate oaths, and therefore he should only be liable one and not three. So basically, the Gemara is bothered by how do you know that he just said, I'm not going to eat three kinds of bread? Is that considered, the Mishnah says it's considered three separate oaths. And if you go and eat wheat, barley, and spelt bread, you're liable three. You're liable for violating three oaths. Says the Gemara, maybe it's one oath. I'm not eating these three breads, as opposed to all other foods in the world. That's all he's saying. So that the Gemara says, he should have just said, I'm not going to eat wheat, barley, and spelt. He said, I'm not going to eat wheat bread. I'm not going to eat barley bread. I'm not going to eat spelt bread. He added the word pas, the word bread, before each one of the categories. So if he just wanted to obligate himself to not eat wheat, barley, and spelt, he should have just said, I'm not eating wheat, barley, and spelt. So says the Gemara, well, no, he couldn't have said, I'm not eating wheat, barley, and spelt because v'dil malachus, because that would have included not be able to chew on it. He wanted to just obligate himself from eating it, not from chewing on the actual kernels. If he just said, I'm not eating wheat, barley, spelt, so then that would have implied that he's not going to chew on the grains. But he wanted to say, I'm not eating them when they're breads. That's why he mentioned pas. So says the Gemara, let's try again. The Havei Lememar, pas chitin v'sarin v'kusmin. So the Gemara says he should have said, if he wanted to prohibit himself from just these three breads and nothing else. And it would be it's one oath. I'm not eating breads, these two breads. But it's not three oaths. So instead of mentioning the word bread three times, he could have just said, I'm not eating bread of wheat, barley, and spelt. And then you would know that he's not talking about the kernels. He's talking about them in their bread form. And you're only obligated one. So says the Gemara, well, where did you place the word bread? Pas, chitin, v'sarin, v'kusmin. Who says that the word bread goes on all three categories? Maybe the word bread only goes in the first category of wheat. So what he's saying is, I'm going to obligate myself from eating wheat bread, but then barley and spelt is referring to even chewing the kernels. V'dilma pas chitin lechol. If he were to say that, it would mean he cannot eat wheat bread, but sa'orin v'kus melachos. But it would obligate him to say, it would obligate him from chewing on barley and spelt kernels. And that's why he had to mention the word bread before each and every category to show you that he's not going to eat. He wants to obligate himself from eating these three types of breads. So that's why he said that. But once again, not to make three different oaths. He's just specifying these three breads I don't want to eat. It should be one oath, not three oaths. So says the Gemara, if you really meant one oath and not three oaths, you should have said the following: the Havei Lemeimar, Pas Chitin, Vishal Sa'orin, Vishal Kusman. You should have said the following. He should have said, I'm obligated from eating wheat bread and that of, or he adds the word vishel, and that of barley and that of spelt. If you say the word vishel before each category, before the last two categories, so then you're clearly referring to bread. You're saying, I don't want to eat bread, wheat bread, and that of barley. What does it mean, that of? It means, and bread of barley, and that of spelt. It means, of, and bread of spelt bread. So that would be a way where you would specify, we would understand that you are obligating yourself from eating three breads. No one's going to think what you mean to say is really barley kernels and spelt kernels, because you said the word vishel, which it's going back on whatever chitin was, whatever wheat was, and wheat was bread. So that would have been the correct way to obligate yourself in one oath from these three types of breads. Yet, what did the guy say? He said the word bread before each one of the categories. He said, I'm making a Shavuot from eating bread of wheat, bread of barley, bread of spelt. Why did he say the word pas, bread, three times? So, yeah. So, yeah, okay, good. Turning the page. The Dilma, maybe if he would have said that I'm not eating bread of wheat, and then he just added the two words vishel, and of barley, and of spelt, what he would mean to what we understand from his words is that he just doesn't want to make a mishkababbled bread. Vidilma aide tarovis. He's just saying, I don't want to eat bread that has these three things inside of it. I'm not going to eat bread that has inside of it spelt wheat, barley, and spelt. So therefore, he had to specify the word bread before each one of the categories. So to that, the Gemara says, Ema, he could have said, V'chein shel sa'orim, v'chein shel kusmin. He could have just made a very simple oath. I will not eat bread of wheat, v'chein, and similarly that of kusmin, and similarly that of sa'orim, that of barley, and similarly that of spelt. That would have been a very nice way to tell us that you want to make one oath, restricting yourself from these three types of breads. Pas lamali. Why did he mention the word pas before the word chita, which is wheat, before barley, and before spelt? Lamali. Shmamino lechalek. He did it to be lechalek, which means to tell you that he's making three separate oaths. He's making an oath from wheat, he's making an oath from barley, and he's making an oath from spelt. And when he says the word pas before each of those, what he's saying is, I'm making three separate oaths. That's why the Mishnah mentioned that if you eat these three breads, you're liable for three prohibitions. It's in essence three different oaths. If he wanted to make one oath, just prohibiting these three types of breads, he should have just said, I'm not eating bread of wheat, and similarly that of barley, and similarly that of spelt. The fact that he didn't say that and he said the word pas teaches us that he's really making three separate oaths. Okay. So the next part of Mishnah talked about drinking. What did the guy say? The guy said, I'm not drinking. And then he drank a lot. So you're only liable one. Fine. Then he said, I'm making a Shavuot. He makes an oath. I'm not drinking wine, oil, or honey. So he says, a Shavuot, shelo eshte, I'm not drinking, yain shemen v'dvash, wine, oil, and honey. And yet he drinks wine and oil and honey. He's liable for each and every one. He's liable three different oaths. So now, the Gemara is very bothered by this because we just explained to us when it came to bread, you had to mention the word pas, bread, before the three categories. Yet by these three liquids, these three drinks of wine, oil, and honey, you didn't mention anything before the three categories, and yet you're liable for all three. So that, the Gemara says, is very troublesome. Bishlama hasam de amris miyasrele pas pas lichiyuva. That, what we just discussed. It says the word pas, the extra two passes. It says the word pas two more times to teach you he is liable for each and every kind of bread that he eats. But elahacha over here, it doesn't specify anything unique before the three categories. It just says, I'm not going to drink wine, oil, and honey. Elahacha mai have lememar. What should he have said? So, what do you mean? Not what should he have said? What can you say over here? Why are you liable for three separate things? You should be only liable one. So, Dilma lemifter nafshe mimashki achrina kasi. Maybe he's just saying, I want to make a shvuah to restrict myself in wine, oil, and honey, as opposed to all other drinks, as opposed to, I don't know, Gatorade, Powerade, water, things like that. That's all he's saying. It's one oath obligating these three liquids in exclusion of everything else. But who said this to obligate you three separate oaths? How do you know that from that part of the Mishnah? It could just as well be telling you that you're excluding all other drinks. So how does the Mishnah know that you're liable for each and every drink? It's like, how does the Mishnah know that you made three oaths? Maybe it's one oath. So Amarav Papa, you have to say the Mishnah is talking about a specific case. Hacha b'munachim lefanav askinan. Really, the Mishnah is talking about where you have in front of you wine, oil, and honey. They're sitting in front of you. Shahaya lo lomar shvua shelo eshta elu. Now, you have three drinks in front of you. You have your wine, oil, and honey. And let's say you wanted to restrict yourself in only these three, in exclusion of all other liquids. What would be the proper formulation of that? He should have said, these things I'm not going to drink. And that would tell us that it's these three you don't want, but all other ones you do want. The fact that he spoke it out explicitly, I'm not drinking wine, oil, and honey, teaches us that what he's trying to make is three separate oaths. So, says the Gemara, this assumption that if he would have said, I'm not drinking these, that would have included all wines, oils, and honeys, so that we're going to take issue with. Vidilma, eluhu de lo shasina, but achrini shasina. If a guy has in front of him wine, oil, and honey, and he makes a shvuah, he makes an oath, I'm not drinking these. So the Gemara assumed it meant these three categories of liquids. But now the Gemara is saying, maybe it just means these three that are in front of you. But my friend's wine, my friend's oil, my friend's honey, he's never restricting himself in. So that's why he couldn't have said that. So back to our question. When he spoke out explicitly, wine, oil, and honey, so maybe that's just making one oath in exclusion of everything else. Saying these in front of me would not excluded him from everything else. It would just have excluded the things that are in front of him, but it would not have excluded him from your friend's wine, your friend's oil, and your friend's honey. So, Ela de Amar Shvua de Lo Shasina Kigon Elu. Okay, but if he wanted to restrict himself in these three categories, he could have said it differently. He could have said, I'm making an oath that I'm not going to drink things kigon elu that are like these. So he's not saying I'm not drinking these. He's saying I'm not drinking things like these. That would have included all wines, all oils, and all honeys. The fact that he spoke out explicitly, wine, honey, and oil, coming to teach us that it's really three separate oaths. Says the Gemara, hold on. If he would have said things that are similar to these, you made an assumption that once again would restrict him from these three categories. However, Dilma, Kigon Elu, Dilo Shasina, and Batzer Mehachi, Vete Mehachi. These three are in certain vessels, right? They're either they're in wine glasses, oil glasses, or they're in I don't know what you put honey in, a honey bowl, a honeycomb, right? So maybe when he says like these, he's not talking about the categories of drinks. He's just talking about the sizes, right? I'm gonna obligate myself from things like these, meaning it means this size. The 1 liter. Imagine they're all in a 1 liter bottle: wine, oil, and honey. So he just means to say, I'm not going to. I'm just not going to drink things that are 1 liter, 1 liter wine, 1 liter oil, 1 liter honey. But less than that, more than that, that I'm not going to. That I was never restricted in. Yeah. So says the Gemara, Ella kigon da Amar, really kigon da Amar shvua shelo eshte mi min elu. If he meant to restrict himself in all categories of wine, oil, and honey, he should have said, I'm not drinking from these species, from these categories. That would have been a way to restrict himself from these 3 categories. A simpler way. The fact that he spoke out, I'm not going to make an oath, I'm making an oath from not drinking wine, oil, and honey, must mean it's really 3 oaths. Says the Gemara, the Dilma min eluhu de lo shasina baha inhu gufayu shasina. Well, if you'd have said that, you would have thought maybe it's these kind of categories he's not going to drink, but these themselves I will drink. So that's also not clear. These kinds of species would have been general kedem wine I'm not going to drink, but this one I will drink. That's also not a good idea. Okay, so says the Gemara, attempting again. Ema shelo eshta elu uminayu. He could have said, I'm not drinking these and their categories. That would have restricted himself from drinking these and all other wine, oil, and honey. The fact that he didn't say that, and instead he said, I'm not drinking wine, he spoke it out, wine, oil, and honey, is coming to teach you, it's referring to 3 oaths. Okay, so that was all basically Rav Papa's attempt to codify the Mishnah to explain why you're liable for all 3. Because as long as I find you a simpler way to speak, then you could say that the more complicated way was referring to all kinds of wines, oils, and honeys. Rav Acha Breder Rav Ika wasn't happy with this. He had another answer. He said, there's a background to our Mishnah. B'mesarev bo chaver baskinan. His friends are pressuring him to drink. Yeah, peer pressure. So the Amar Lo, they're telling him, come on, come drink with me. Bo v'shasa imi. He's on break from yeshiva. He's getting back. He meets his old friends. They're like, come on, come drink with us. So drink with us. What are we drinking? Come drink with us. Wine, honey, wine, oil, honey. So now, what should he have said to say no to them? The hayalo lomar shavua shel eshta imcha. He should have said, they said, come drink with us, wine, oil, and honey. His response should have been, I'm not drinking with you. If he would have said, I'm not drinking with you, that would have included all wines, oils, and honey. So why did he speak out in his shvua, I'm not drinking wine, oil, and honey, and instead of just saying, I'm not drinking with you, shemen v'dvash lamali, l'chayev akol akas v'akas. He was restricting himself on all wines, all oils, and all honeys, in general, not just with his friends. He was restricting himself from all categories from all kinds of wine, oil, and honey. Okay. Time is it? Okay, we have time. So, yeah, says a Mishnah later on. So the Mishnah later on is discussing when somebody is claiming that you have something of theirs in your possession. So the example is Tanan Hasan, the Mishnah's over there. Tain li. So a guy tells you, Reuven tells Shimon, give me chitin, so'orin, v'kusman. Give me back my wheat, barley, and spelt. Sheyesh li b'yadcha. That's in your hands. Give it back to me. Now the guy has no idea what he's talking about, so he makes a swear. Shavuot she'en lach b'yadi klum. He makes a swear, I have nothing of this in my hand. Nothing. So if he ends up lying and he ends up having these in his hands, eino chayv ela achas. He's only liable for one. Shvua she'en lecha b'yadi chitin v'sa'orin v'kusman. Instead of saying a general shvua, I have none of these in my hand, and then you're found to be a liar, you're liable let's say he said he made a shvuah, I make a swear, I don't have in my hand your wheat, barley, or spelt. He spoke out. The guy's claiming, give me back my wheat, barley, and spelt. And the guy, and Shimon responds to him with a shvuah, I'm swearing to you, I don't have your wheat, barley, or spelt. There, the Mishnah says, Chayiv al kol achas va'achas. You're liable for each and every one. If you find that to be a liar, so then, and you actually have his wheat, spelt, and barley, you're liable for all of them. Now, the Amar Rabbi Yochanan made a statement, Afilu pruta mikulam mitztarefes. Even a pruta from all of them combines. Meaning that as long as you have a pruta's worth of spelt, and a pruta's worth of wheat, and a pruta's worth of barley, you'll be liable for each and every one of those. You'll be obligated for the denial of the wheat, barley, and spelt. Now, in this case, there's a machlokas over there, and we're going to bring it back to over here in a second. Pligi barav acha v'ravina. So there's going to be a machlokas when the guy is found to be a liar, and he actually has the guy's wheat, barley, and spelt in his hand. So are you obligated 3 or are you obligated 4? Because the guy says you have these in my hand, that I know you have these in your hand. And you said, I don't have your wheat, barley, and spelt. So the mere fact that you even had something of his was one denial. And then each one that you denied is another denial. So do you view it that you're obligated in 3 sacrifices or 4 sacrifices? Is it like you really lied and you did 3 things wrong? Because the guy said, you have in my hand my wheat, barley, and spelt. And you said with a swear, I don't have your wheat, barley, and spelt. And then you're found to be a liar. So on the one hand, you're for sure liable for all those 3. That's for sure. The question is, are you liable a 4th one for even having the guy's things in his hand? So pligi barav acha v'ravina. Chad amar a prati mechayev, a klali lo mechayev, v'chad amar a klali nami mechayev. So they argue over there that you're going to end up bringing 3 asham offerings, 3 guilt offerings. So one opinion holds you're only obligated to bring 3 and not 4, because you didn't respond to him, I have nothing of yours in my hand. You responded to him, I don't have your wheat, barley, and spelt. That includes 3. That's 3 different shvuas that you made and you denied, and you're found to be a liar. So you're obligated each one. Now, for each one of those, you have to have at least a pruta's worth for each one. They cannot combine. If you only have less than a pruta of wheat, barley, and spelt, they cannot combine. When will they combine? When the guy tells you, give me back my wheat, barley, and spelt, and you respond to him, I don't have anything of yours in my hand. If you respond generally, and then you're found to be a liar, so then that's where Rabbi Yochanan said, even if you have less than a pruta, a minimal amount from wheat, barley, and spelt, you'll be liable. So if your denial is, I have nothing of yours in my hand, so then as long as you have a pruta from all 3 of those foods, you'll be liable. If your denial is, I don't have your wheat, barley, or spelt, then you need a pruta worth from each one of those to be liable a korban. That's the minimal for a korban, for this korban. Okay. The other opinion says that that you're actually liable for 4. You're liable for shvuas, even when you deny the specifics. I don't have your wheat, barley, and spelt. You're also denying that you don't have anything of his in your hands. So that's going to be a 4th one. Okay. Fine. Either way, though, that we'll see more in about 2 weeks. But back to us for a second. So hachamai, says the Gemara in our Mishnah. How do you apply this to our Mishnah? that machlokus that you have over there, when you deny the three categories specifically, the guy says, "Give me my wheat, barley, and spelt," and you make a shvua, "I don't have your wheat, barley, and spelt." There's a machlokus. Are you obligated 3 or 4? Is that going to hold true by us? Meaning, a guy says, "I'm not going to eat," right? He says, "I'm not going to eat bread of wheat, bread of barley, and bread of spelt." And then he goes and he eats. Would you have the same machlokus over here? He's for sure obligated 3: wheat, barley, and spelt. But maybe you could say, including his "I will not eat," is that I will not eat anything, and you still ate something. Would that get you a fourth? Is that going to be obligate you in a fourth shvua or not? So Amar Rava, the two cases are very different. Think about it. Hachi hash, are they similar at all? Hassam over there, every time you deny something, you're obligated another shvua. So you could deny the same thing over and over and over again, and you'll be obligated, if you're found to be a liar, over and over and over again. So Hassam mechayev aklala umechayev prata. There you're obligated for the specifics, and you're obligated for the fact that you have something of his in your hand. Why? Daha, because you could deny, make a shvua and deny it again, and you'll be obligated over and over and over again. Every time you're denying that you have his money in your hands, that's what that obligation comes for. So, but in our case, where you say, "I'm not going to eat anything," you make a shvua, you're not going to eat anything, but hacha, isa kadaitach, isa bechlala. So, if you're going to say that really, when you make a shvua, "I'm not going to eat bread of wheat, bread of barley, bread of barley, and bread of spelt," and you want to say that really that includes, "I'm not going to eat anything," well, if in your words, "I'm not going to eat bread of wheat, barley, and spelt," if including those words means that you're also not going to eat anything, any kind of these three breads, if you were to say that, so then in the world of oaths, you'll never be obligated for the actual, for once you include in your words a general oath that you're not eating these three breads, then the specific oaths that you uttered can't get off the ground because you're already obligated. So, yeah, 1 second. So the question was, when a guy said, "I'm not going to eat bread of barley, bread of wheat, bread of barley, bread of spelt." So simply understood, it's 3 different oaths. But we saw a concept over there that even though you specified these 3 things, it could be that included is also a general shvua of not eating these 3 types of breads. That's also included in your words. At the end of the day, that's also included in your words. But the problem with a shvua, this shvua is, once you're going to learn that it's included in your words, that you're not going to eat these 3 types of breads, so then if that's already considered a shvua, then the 3 specific shvuas of "I won't eat bread of wheat, bread of barley, bread of spelt," they can't get off the ground. It says, "Amai mechayev." Why are you obligated? You're already mushba va'omedu. If by uttering that "I'm not going to eat these 3 breads," you're doing 2 things at the same time. You're obligating yourself in a general shvua of not eating from these 3 types of breads. Then you cannot anymore obligate yourself in not eating these 3 specific types of breads of paschit and pasar and paskusman, because the oath has nowhere to obligate you. You're already obligated in these 3 kinds of breads. So that's why that concept is not going to apply over here. So really, when you say "I won't eat bread of wheat, bread of barley, bread of spelt," it's only referring to that you're obligating yourself not to eat 1 shvua for not eating wheat bread, 1 shvua for not eating barley bread, and 1 shvua for not eating spelt bread. But we don't say after the fact that you're not going to eat, that also including your words, is "I'm not going to eat these 3 types of breads." Because if you were to say that, so then the other specific shvuas couldn't get off the ground because you're already obligated. Okay, we'll start. Maybe we'll stop here. We'll stop. It's a whole new section, which goes on for the next hour and a half. So we'll stop here, and Bez Hashem will continue tomorrow morning